Hello and welcome, 2D Gamer back again with another 5 PS1 games that are worth playing. Just another reminder, this isn't a top 5 list, just 5 more games out of a much bigger list that I have written down in my head. But with no further ado, on to version 2 of 5 PS1 games worth playing. Apocalypse. A false prophet known as the Reverend is trying to bring about his own version of the apocalypse and bring about the subsequent death of billions. Humanity's hope rests on the shoulders of one man, Bruce Willis. That's right, Apocalypse's biggest claim to fame is that the main character, Trey Kincaid, is played by John McClane himself. Willis being motion captured, cyber scanned, as the case says, which probably means facial scanned, and even handles voiceover work. If Contra blended with Smash TV, the end result would look quite a bit like Apocalypse. Taking the level-based shoot everything that moves and then shoot it some more gameplay from Contra, and then combining it with the same control scheme found in games like Smash TV and Robotron, where directional shooting is handled by either the face buttons or the right analog stick, you have a formula for a game that fills the near void of action shooters in the PS1 library. The entire generation of gaming that the PS1 was a part of sort of went without a true successor to the Contra series. Not even the Contra games released truly filled that void, but games like Apocalypse and a few others did an admirable job of trying to take the abdicated Contra crown, and as such, is certainly one of the best efforts in the action shooter genre on the PS1. In similar Contra vein, Apocalypse keeps it simple. You run, jump, dodge, and shoot through 11 levels using a varied, but not particularly original assortment of weapons. Aside from the default machine gun, which has infinite ammo, Trey, has the ability to pick up and use other weapons like the flamethrower, particle beam, grenade launcher, and homing missiles, to name a few. All the extra weapons have finite amounts of ammo, represented as the blue energy bar at the top right corner of the HUD. Bruce also has screen-clearing smart bombs at his disposal. The game never fails to deliver on solid action gameplay for gamers to revel in. The levels take place in varied locales and occasionally have scenes to break up the action, which brings up a complaint I have with the game. One of the means of adding variety to the levels is the inclusion of tough platforming elements. Generally, these elements aren't something I normally complain about even in action games. But the last Boy Scout, as he should, moves really fast. So fast that oftentimes on narrow platforms Trey will run off the other side for certain death. The whole jumping mechanic itself feels a little off, making the platform elements quite a bit more frustrating than needed. The platformer jumping scenes are the hardest elements in the game, with the quickest deaths and can drain your lives extremely quickly. However, that being said, with enough learning and patience you can beat them. They certainly don't ruin the game at all, but they can lead to many game overs, which means reloading your save from the beginning of each level. And moving platform scenes make you feel like a sitting duck for multiple enemies to pummel you with fire. Graphically, by PS1 standards, the fire and explosion effects dazzle, while the environmental detail is also pleasing to the eyes. The visuals are very polished overall, and the game looks sharp. Apocalypse was developed by Neversoft Entertainment, who brought Tony Hawk to life, and I would assume that even though Apocalypse came out first, it's probably the same engine that ran the Hawkman's game too, and it runs well with little to no slowdown when the action gets hot. The general music in the levels is good, but it doesn't stand out to me. There are even a couple of licensed songs like War from System of a Down in the game. Bruce's one-liners are also mildly amusing, but you will hear almost all of them by the time you beat the first level. And Bruce's acting certainly isn't his best job ever. Apocalypse is also only single player and has only 11 levels. Once you beat it a couple of times, there isn't a ton of reasons to come back to replay it. But I can't really fault it for what it doesn't have as opposed to what it offers. And overall, it doesn't take the Contra crown, but it is in itself a fun action game that fans of the genre should look into. And if Apocalypse interests you, here are 2 games from my own collection, and I will only be recommending games that I own personally, that I would also like to suggest. MDK. I recently did a video review as an underrated gem redux on this one. Originally developed by Shiny on the PC, but ported to the PS1 by Neversoft actually. Its unique art style and fun play mechanics make this a must-have for action fans. 1. No, I'm not pulling a Who's on First on you. That's actually the game's name, 1. This game comes from Visual Concepts, who would later go on to develop the 2K Sports line for Sega on the Dreamcast, and is very similar to Apocalypse in concept, but goes about it in a different way. It doesn't have the Robotron controls, but the more stuff you blow up, the higher your rage meter goes, which fills up your life and makes your weapons more powerful. There are also some tricky jump scenes in this one as well. Bust a Groove. I'm notoriously terrible at any game that requires the reflexes past those of a drunken sloth, so I apologize ahead of time for this poorly played footage. Bust a Groove, known as Bust a Move in Japan but due to Taito's Puzzle Bobble series taking the name in North America requiring a subsequent name change, is a rhythm and dance game which requires you to put in button combinations in a timed manner. On the left of the bar is a combination of D-pad directions to be put in at any time. On the right of the bar is a button you must press every 4th beat in the game. So you have a 4-beat time limit to enter the directional pad commands before you press the button, with each 4th beat changing with the song's tempo. Bust a Groove was one of the earliest games influenced by what I call the Parappa effect. I'm not sure off the top of my head, but save some obscure Japanese game. If Parappa the Rappa, shown here from a demo disc because I don't actually own the original Parappa as of yet, was the first music game, or rhythm game if you will, and one may even be able to argue that it's just a music version of previous QuickTime event games like Dragon's Lair. But you've gotta believe that every music game since can trace its roots back to Parappa. It doesn't matter if it's a dance-off game like Bust a Groove, Dance Dance Revolution, or even the modern Guitar Hero and Rock Band series. The Parappa effect has left its mark on gaming, opening up an entirely new genre, and Bust a Groove, while not being as memorable as Parappa, is a quality, if not almost forgotten, early addition to the genre. The single-player mode has you dancing off against another opponent through 12 stages. The progression is similar to a fighting game, and there are 3 difficulty settings to play through the game with. So if you're sucky like I am, you can make the game easier to get through. Aside from the one-player game, there's also a 2-player mode and a dance view mode where you can customize the moves of characters you've already beaten the game with. Overall, Bust a Groove may not beat Parappa, but fans of the genre should check this game out, and its sequel, Bust a Groove 2. I don't currently own Bust a Groove 2 though. And since I'm only suggesting games out of my own collection, which disqualifies Parappa, though it's a given, I have these 2 suggestions instead. Jammer Lammy. Seen as an offshoot to Parappa, Lammy has the same art style and similar gameplay, but with more of a rock theme in the music. I'm still just as terrible at this game as I am the rest. Dance Dance Revolution Canamics. Upon further inspection of my PS1 collection, I realized that I actually do have another rhythm game, or music game if you will, and that's Dance Dance Revolution Canamics. Now I haven't fully played through this one, admittingly, but it's a Dance Dance Revolution game, and you can't go wrong with the entire series. That is, unless you're me and are horrible at the series. I'm playing this footage with the PS1 controller because I don't have a dance pad for the PS1. Crash Team Racing. To roughly paraphrase a quote I once heard from Jason Rubin, if you don't do something new or do something better, don't do it at all. And in Crash Team Racing, you have my personal favorite kart racer of all time. Not a knock on Mario Kart, which has and always will be an amazing series and the undisputed king of the genre. But CTR, in my probably very unpopular opinion, just did it better. Crash Team Racing, while not new conceptually, takes ideas from two popular N64 racing games, but adds an incredibly fun and innovative boost feature that takes over the entire gameplay. In CTR, you find the kart racing gameplay of Mario Kart, power-ups, tons of shortcuts to find, and even the same multiplayer modes, mixed with the adventure mode of Diddy Kong Racing. While Crash Team Racing doesn't do anything new conceptually, taking already established formulas and making them its own, it's the boost system that really defines what makes this game different from the rest. Like in Mario Kart, hitting the trigger button gives a player the ability to jump into a power slide. However, the difference comes from the little boost gauge at the bottom right hand corner of the screen, or visually when your smoke turns black mid-slide. By hitting the trigger on the other side when the meter is full, you are given the ability to boost up to 3 times per power slide. So basically, if you power slide with R1, hitting L1 when the meter is full will give you a small boost. Players are also given boosts for hang time by hitting jump before you get off the end of a ramp or other high surfaces. You will find yourself finding any way to use the boost, even on straightaways, and kicking yourself for not boosting off of every single jump. It may not show from merely watching this footage, but the boost system adds a whole new set of concentration to the kart racer formula, and it's done so well that it will be sorely missed in any kart racer you play without it. It just feels that natural. Like the adventure mode in Diddy Kong Racing, the one in CTR has you driving around a hub world where you have to complete a series of 4 races to unlock a boss race. After coming in first in each race, you also unlock the relic race where, as in Crash Bandicoot Warped, you aim to complete each race in a certain time collecting boxes that stop the clock in order to gain a relic. And the CTR challenge, where players must find and collect the letters C, T, and R, which are hidden throughout the track and come in first in the race. The adventure mode not only adds immensely to the replay value of the game, but it's also a means of unlocking hidden characters as well. Again, not an original idea, but its addition adds tons of replay value to an already polished kart racer. Graphically speaking, CTR is easily top tier in PS1 visuals. Naughty Dog was one of the most talented PS1 development teams, and the game even runs on a brand new engine built from the ground up, whereas Crash 2 and Crash Warp still had tech in them from the original Crash from 1996. Even by PS1 standards, to scrap an entire engine and build a new one from the ground up while still releasing the game about a year after Warped was an amazing technical feat and shows just how talented Naughty Dog really was. The game was also the end of an era of sorts, being the last Crash game that Naughty Dog developed, as Crash was actually owned by Universal Interactive Studios and not Sony. Naughty Dog would later go on to bigger and better things than Crash, like Jak and Daxter and, of course, Uncharted. And speaking of games that haven't been the same since, CTR also has a hidden demo of Spyro 2, which was taken away from Insomniac for the same reason that Crash was taken away from Naughty Dog. To unlock the demo, at CTR's main title screen, while holding R1 and L1, hit in sequence down, circle, triangle, and then right. And looking into my own collection, I realized that I don't actually own any other kart racers per se. The general suggestions that come to mind are games like Speed Punks, Motor Toon Grand Prix, and even Walt Disney World Quest Magical Racing Tour, which I have a video uploaded for, but it was a sale copy that I was playtesting. So the closest two I have are NASCAR Rumble. This isn't your granddaddy's NASCAR game, taking the NASCAR license and infusing it with the kart racing genre, with tons of shortcuts to learn and a crazy amount of power-ups like tornadoes that spin your opponents around, which makes for a mixture for what is easily one of the PS1's best alternative racing games. Don't be afraid of the NASCAR name, this is a must-play. Roll Cage Stage 2. My collection seems to be devoid of the original roll cage as well. What can I say? I'm still collecting. However, this game comes from the team behind Blast Chamber on the PS1 and is best described as Wipeout with RC cars. The racing is fast and fun, and players even have the ability to drive on the sides of walls for a distance. Along with single-player modes like Campaign and Single Race Option, there's also Co-op Campaign and a 2-player Battle Mode, similar to the battle modes you find in kart racing games. Legend of Mana, or is that Mana? I'll just pronounce it how I always have, Mana, to the annoyance of a few people out there. But before I get into this game, I have to clear something up first. This is Secret of Mana on the Super Nintendo, which is undoubtedly one of Squaresoft's best efforts in the 16-bit era, easily worthy of being mentioned in the same sentence as games like Chrono Trigger and Final Fantasy VI, or Final Fantasy III in the US. It's a tried and true RPG classic and one of the best RPGs of all time. I mentioned Secret of Mana for one particular reason. In order to enjoy Legend of Mana, you have to completely forget about the existence of Secret of Mana. Because if you go into Legend expecting a PS1 sequel to Secret of Mana, you will not only be sorely disappointed, you may not even be able to enjoy Legend of Mana for what it is. In fact, you may be pretty pissed off about it. And with that out of the way, let me also say that this action RPG isn't for everyone. The game's design is completely open, and by completely open I mean it's entirely up to you how to progress, or if you even want to progress. From the start of the game you choose between a male and female character, you choose the part of the map the game will take place in, and you even set the layout of where all the cities and dungeons will sit. In the game there are 67 missions, if you will, to play through. But again, you have to discover these quests on your own with little or no direction. Sometimes events seem to happen at random, and your character is one of those strong, silent types that pretty much just observes the story unfolding around them. If you're looking for a deep storyline, this isn't the RPG to feed that need. The openness of design can lead to aimless wandering at times too, but again, progression is up to the player's will to progress. Everything is up to you to find and do. Along with the quests, Legend also offers the player the ability to forge weapons and magical instruments, create creatures called golems to follow you around as a battle buddy, raise a pet monster to take with you, and even create fruit to feed your pets by giving a combination of seeds to a talking tree. In fact, the features in this game can be a little overwhelming at times, but it adds to the replay value with these entirely optional modes of play. And though Secret of Mana had a 3-player option with the multi-tap, Legend still keeps the multiplayer tradition alive with the 2-player co-op option, even allowing a friend to load the character from their save into your game. The battle system is also completely real-time, no waiting for a power gauge to refill to attack again. Players are free to mash away, and players gain experience by collecting crystals dropped by the enemies. No crystals collected, no experience. However, about halfway through the game your lead character will become such a high level that no enemy can touch you, thus killing any challenge left in the game. In playing this game, preparing for this review, I accidentally beat it for the first time. I have this nasty habit of playing RPGs right up to near the end of the game, and then getting sidetracked for years on them before coming back. Just ask Grandia and Breath of Fire 4. Upon beating Legend of Mana, you're given the option to save your game and save over your save, which starts you back at the beginning of the game, keeping everything you had at the end of the game and only resetting the story elements. The only problem being, from what I can tell, the enemies didn't get any harder the second time through, meaning that you're just as untouchable as you were halfway through the game. If I remember correctly, the background visuals are watercolor paintings, which give the game a beautiful and very unique look. Square also used this visual style in Saga Frontier 2, a game that I've started multiple times but have never gotten very far into. However, I mostly mention the graphics in these reviews as a courtesy, and a unique art style won't make up for the fact that this game, though I enjoyed it, has its share of flaws and quirks, meaning it's only for specific RPG gamers out there who can appreciate its open design. The PS1 was an RPG powerhouse, and there's probably little need to suggest two RPGs to gamers out there. Not like anything I say could or would surprise you by its existence. But keeping with the action RPG theme, I would also suggest these two. Alundra. Think The Legend of Zelda with a much heavier, insane, puzzle focus, and more RPG leveling in nature, and you'll have a good idea of what Alundra has to offer. However, Alundra reminds me more of Landstalker on the Sega Genesis than Zelda. As Alundra, you enter into people's dreams, dispelling the demons that are keeping them captive. I never got around to picking up Alundra 2, which got rid of the sprites for polygonal visuals. Threads of Fate. I was actually thinking about giving a shout out to Musashi, or maybe even the Grainstream Saga or Azure Dreams. But I decided to go with another action RPG that some people hated, but others, including myself, really enjoyed. Giving players the option to play as either Rue, a shapeshifter on a quest to save a friend, or Mint, a selfish sorceress on a quest to regain power after losing her throne to her sister, each by searching for a powerful ancient relic. Each character has their own unique playstyle due to their different abilities. Threads takes place in a limited world. It lacks the openness of other action RPGs. It's also really short in length, even with two characters to play through with. But there is still enjoyment to be had with this action RPG. That's Quake 2 for all you slobs out there that don't recognize the symbol. Minimum system requirements to run Quake 2 on a PC are a 90 MHz processor, 133 MHz recommended, 16 megabytes of RAM, 24 megabytes recommended, and for GL Quake you needed a graphics card like a 3DFX Voodoo, Voodoo 2, or even an ATI TNT Rage, among many other options at the time. The PS1 specs: 33.8 MHz processor and 2 megabytes of system RAM, one of which was devoted to video RAM. And though PC and console specs aren't exactly easily interchangeable, because a PC has more to run, things like the operating system and background applications, irregardless, what we have here is a game that shouldn't exist, shouldn't run, shouldn't even be remotely capable of running on the PS1, and especially not this well on a system no one wanted the headache of porting the first Quake to, though those sly devils at Lobotomy got it to run on the Saturn. Somehow, not only did Hammerhead, who had only previously had Shadow Master on the PS1 under their belt, get this to run, but they've locked it in at 30 frames per second without a hint of slowdown to be seen. Not only that, but everything is polished visually without certain visual glitches that are so common in PS1 games, like texture warping, which you can only sort of see a hint of when you run along walls. The textures aren't a gritty, blocky mess, and objects feel completely solid with no clipping issues to be had. And you occasionally notice a texture seam, those white lines you see in a lot of PS1 games on the edge of each textured area. The game looks clean and is generally free from visual glitches. Visually, by PS1 standards, this game runs and looks spectacular, and is easily the most astounding technical feat on the PS1. When people say it looks like a software version of Quake 2 running on a PC, that certainly isn't an insult to Quake 2 on the PS1. The simple fact is, this is easily the greatest technical feat on the PS1. But the smoothness of its engine would mean nothing if the game didn't have good gameplay and design. Quake 2 is a fast-paced, in-your-face, kill everything that moves without asking questions, old-school first-person shooter that games like Halo took the formula from and made it slower, less fun, with an aimbot. The PS1 version of Quake 2 does a spectacular job of capturing the feel of the PC original. And while the PC version will always be the undisputed king, there's still plenty of in-your-face action to be had in the PS1 version. The enemies may not be the smartest in the world, but they make up for it in numbers, toughness, and just surprising you. The weapons feel just as hefty and satisfying to use as they do in the PC version. You definitely get the feeling that your lone, doomed Space Marine is a badass just by the feel of movement and gunplay. The 15 levels, all filled with secret areas to reward exploration, are taken directly from the PC version and remain as true as they possibly can to the PC levels. But as expected, cuts needed to be made to fit them into the PS1's lesser RAM. However, PC gamers will certainly recognize these areas. The PS1 even faithfully sticks to the hub world design of the original, where the game doesn't use the same level progression as Doom or even Quake, the original Quake. The hub world design means Quake 2 takes place in giant levels, loading in portions from each part of the level as you go along, meaning that the game feels like one large seamless adventure. Oftentimes you are required to travel back and forth through previous parts of the level to progress, giving the level design more of a Half-Life feel than Doom. The load times are also incredibly fast between the areas and don't really feel like a break in the action. And though there are certainly more of them, the load times in the PS1 version are actually shorter than the load times in the Nintendo 64 version. No, I didn't stutter. There are actually load times in the N64 version of Quake and Quake 2. The music and sound effects are taken directly from the PC version too, whereas the N64 version went for the ambient music, while the PS1 version keeps the Sonic Mayhem composed music from the PC original. The biggest surprise is the inclusion of 4-player split-screen multiplayer on the same console. That's right, not only is this an incredible single-player port of Quake 2, but this port outdoes itself and every other PS1 first-person shooter with multiplayer by adding 4-player deathmatches, a feat only previously done with a link cable, having 2 people on each console. And there is a possibility I may be forgetting one, but to my knowledge, every other PS1 first-person shooter with split-screen multiplayer struggles to have even 2 players going at it. And though I've never played Quake 2 with more than 2 players, I've seen YouTube videos of 3-player matches, and they didn't even have a hint of slowdown from what I saw. Does this port get any better? If I have one small complaint about the game, it's that the controls are not dual analog. The default analog settings, not taking D-pad controls into account, mimic the Turok presets, aiming with the left stick and moving with the face buttons. But I did find a close preset scheme that lets you aim with the right stick and move with the D-pad. The only catch is that shooting is then handled by pressing L1 and jumping with L2, but you adjust to the scheme with time. The aiming is also just a little touchy, meaning that small twitchy movements will oftentimes lead to a missed shot. However, I am playing this with a PS2 DualShock, which has a much tighter analog stick than the PS1 DualShock did. And it may be a little easier using the looser PS1 DualShock analog stick. Movement does a good job at mimicking the PC version as well. You can get the diagonal jumps going, and you can even rocket jump ever so slightly. There's also support for the PS1 mouse, but I can't comment on the quality of playing with the mouse on account of the fact that I don't own one and don't feel like selling a kidney to get one. Overall, taking into account how stunning a technical feat this port of Quake 2 is to the PS1, Hammerhead really made the greatest technical achievement on the PS1 with this port. You may ask, why didn't Quake 2 on the PS1 get more attention? Why is it never listed in top first-person shooter gaming on the PS1 in mainstream outlets? Why was it completely overlooked by gamers? Well, it's hard to say exactly. However, I can only give my personal speculations as to why this game never got the credit it deserved. The North American release date for Quake 2 on the PS1 was September 30th, 1999. Now, looking back through time to September 1999, you get a clearer picture as to why this game may have been overlooked. On September 9th, the next generation had begun when Sega released the Dreamcast, specifically choosing September 9th to thumb their nose at Sony, who released the PS1 on the same day 4 years prior. Final Fantasy VIII also released on the same day as the Dreamcast. So gamers' attention was not only on the launch of a brand new system, but also with the release of a hugely anticipated game, 21 days prior to Quake 2's release. So suffice to say that the gaming media's attention was drawn away with the first wave of Dreamcast offerings, meaning excitement was at a minimum for a port of an already 2-year-old PC game. However, there is another huge factor. On October 31st, 1999, EA released a bomb on gamers with a little World War II first-person shooter called Medal of Honor. Quake's late September release means that many of the gaming magazines at the time reviewed it in the exact same issue as Medal of Honor. And you can wager a guess as to which one got most of the attention. I myself turned my nose up to this game for almost a decade, because I already had it on the N64 and never thought the PS1 version would ever hold a candle to that version. I didn't even get the PC version until around 2005, but wasn't enlightened to the awesomeness of this port until I stumbled across a YouTube video of it. I can since say that aside from kicking myself for being a snob to this game, it has actually become my personal favorite PS1 first-person shooter. If you like the old-school PC-style first-person shooter gameplay in Quake, then Doom and Final Doom on the PS1 should already be in your library of games, easily being the best playing home conversions of the 90s. However, instead, I'll suggest two other games in similar vein. Duke Nukem Total Meltdown. While Duke is far from unknown even to modern gamers, this PS1 port moves so incredibly fast that I couldn't even keep the gameplay in sync with the Saturn and N64 versions in an old comparison video I made. As far as the levels and features go, this is the closest to the PC original. It also has an excellent remixed soundtrack. Visual glitches aside, this game moves fast and still retains the great design and gameplay first seen in the PC version. It even supports dual analogs, but not very well. And it has link cable multiplayer. Disruptor. And you thought Resistance Fall of Man was Insomniac's first foray into the first-person shooter genre. Disruptor adds its own twist to the old-school shooter formula by adding psionic attack abilities, which is a decent twist. The level designs, while not the greatest ever seen, are still solid. The gameplay is good, and is a PS1 exclusive first-person shooter. However, I'm pretty sure that Insomniac wants to forget about Disruptor's existence in their library. Not because the game is bad or anything, but because of the horrendously cheesy full-motion video sequences that happen before and after each level. Ah, 90s gaming, where have you gone? And there you have it, version 2 of 5 PS1 games worth playing. I actually went pretty long with this video. I'll try and cut it down more in the future. But I did decide to add 2 suggestions to each of the 5, just in case you've already played the ones I suggest or are just generally interested in games that are similar. The suggestion, as I was quick with them, but as far as the reviews, I'm actually getting almost to like full reviews to each game, and it's getting crazy. But anyway, there you have it, and not every game on this list is for every gamer, and I realize that, and that's the beautiful thing is no two people ever have the same taste regardless of who they are. So, the opinions expressed in this video are those of 2D Gamer. And if you do not share them, or hate him for his own opinion, 2D Gamer's okay with that because he doesn't know you and you're a bunch of strangers on the internet and he doesn't really care. Okay, sorry. I always get carried away with that one.